everybody hear me? I just want to thank Al for having us here. I'm not supposed to stay too close to this guy, but I'm always with him. So he's a young guy. I'm supposed to be the boss, right? Am I the boss guy or not?
You're the boss.
So I'm a life coach. So one thing I got to do is I got to hold Al accountable. So after the event, I'm going to take him down to the subway personally. We're going to lick a couple poles together. Right? No, I'm scared. Subway poles. We're together. Yes. Let's start out. I mean, I just want to thank Al for having us here. I had a chef code. I wanted four things I really want to hit on in this presentation. First thing I want to do is get clarity for everybody. Everyone thinks multifamily is this big beast, commercial, multifamily. How do I get into it? I want to dispel that myth. As a restaurant owner, he's a 25-year-old guy. We both got into it. I got into it back in 2013. My first deal, I remember doing it with Jake. Amazing deal. Going to get into that. Second thing, I want to have a framework for y'all. How to get into multifamily. You all think you have to go out and buy a deal. We're going to talk about tax investment. There's other ways to get into multifamily other than buying your own deal. I think the third thing is to dispel those myths. I'm too old. I don't have enough money. I'm too young. I was in the restaurant business. You guys are in the real estate business. Best business in the world. Network, you have tons of money around you. Let's start talking about that.
So before we dive into it, how many here have invested in apartments before? Oh wow, all right. Awesome, very cool. How many of you have heard more and more about apartment investing in the last 24 months? Anyone think it's been heating up a little bit? Good, right? There's a lot of interest. We're going to go into some of the reasons why. And then, does anyone have any questions or certain things that they want us to touch on as we go through the slides today? Is there anything in particular that you want to learn about? Go ahead. Syndication. Awesome. So we're going to talk about syndication. Syndication, for those that haven't heard of it, it's basically a way of, it's kind of a profit-sharing model where you have a sponsor that actively purchases a deal and does the legwork managing it, and then the investors get usually the majority of that. So we're going to dive into syndication. Anything else? Go ahead.
Student housing.
Student housing. Awesome. So we'll touch on student housing a bit. I think it's a great topic. We personally are more of, we'll talk about kind of workforce housing, standard living situations for say, retail employees, and go ahead.
And vet housing.
And vet housing? Okay, good. So we'll talk on that too. And anything else? Go ahead.
An example or two from Manhattan.
An example or two of Manhattan?
Yeah.
Investing in Manhattan?
Yes.
Okay, great. So cool.
So that's not my strong suit. I'm not a three-cap kind of guy. So I would say if you guys have money, look elsewhere. I mean, if you can, but if you're in the space itself, for us, we go in the B and C space. We're in a different kind of asset. So that would be a hard one for me to teach on. I know a lot of people in the city have significant amounts of capital. What they do is they'll go down in the southeast where we are, looking for cap rates. It's just a better environment. I'm afraid of the city, to be honest with you. I just see what's going on with demographics. I see people moving down. I'm a perfect example. I left here in 2017. I moved down to St. Augustine, Florida. Low taxes, no state income tax, quality of living, cost of living, no traffic. No offense to people who love nice schools. You know what I mean? It's a weird thing. You go down there and everyone's from New York. They're all nice down there. I couldn't figure that one out, right? We could talk about that, or you can ask specific questions about the market itself, but I mean, I think we should just introduce ourselves real quick. Sure. I got into the business back in 2013. I had a restaurant for over 20 years. One restaurant, and I was good at it, right? You think if you're good at something, you're going to make a lot of money, and that is not the case. That was not the case with me. So back in 2013, I bought my first property with Jake, our 25-unit property, and within 6 years, I've accumulated over 1,500 units. The first 1,000 was just me and Jake. Refi and roll, and we had over $9 million out of our portfolio. We rolled into the next deal. And was that the right thing to do? Probably not. I should have gotten into syndication a lot sooner, but I'm Italian, I've got a thick head, so I didn't learn, right? I started learning syndication from listening to podcasts. I'm like, this sounds like a great model. You're taking other people's money, and you're not putting any of your own money in there, and you're controlling the asset. But there's a lot of work involved. That's why we're going to talk about it today, how you can all tap into that. You don't have to get into your own deal. You can raise money for somebody else's deal. That's how you can start. And for us, it was just trudging along. We bought a 25-unit. 3 months later, we got a 36-unit. 6 months after that, 136 units. So you fast forward to it, and this year we just closed on a 243-unit deal. Does it take time? Yes. but you need clarity. Why multifamily? What is it going to do for you? I heard the first speaker talking about taxes, taxes, taxes. I love multifamily. Anyone ever heard of cost segregation? Well, when I become a real estate professional, I have a negative AGI.
How many real estate professionals are in the room,
Okay.
full-time?
So, have a talk with your CPA. Multifamily is the way for you. At least it's one tool in your toolbox. I think you should all definitely take a look at it. So, I mean, a couple of the highlights for myself. I've got 6 kids, homeschool kids. I moved down to Florida because I just wanted a lifestyle. I wanted to get out of here. So, did it take a long time? Yes. Was it scary? Yes. Was it the best thing I ever did? Absolutely. Would I do it again? Yes.
All right, then I'll go into my background briefly here, but first, it's just who we are as a group here. So we have a couple different businesses. We're all vertically integrated, but we're all multifamily. Everything we deal with day to day is all multifamily. And we have the actual investment business, which is the core business. Getting founded by Jake and Gino, bottom left, and that was in 2013. And then that scaled up until last year, all just with in-house capital through the refi and roll strategy, with also with our partner Mike at the bottom right. And so they were able to, I'd say, work through a lot of the kinks, right? Before bringing on investor money, which was a big responsibility, was a lot of working through the kinks and getting the processes down. From day one, Jake, Jake's a perfect guy for the job. He went out and actually started a management company. Starting with 25 units, he was self-managing, starting off actually physically knocking on doors, collecting rent himself. And now we've scaled the management company up to about 40 employees. So every single property that we own is also self-managed, which is something that's unique. A lot of people use third-party management companies. Property management is a lot of work. Definitely you have to know what your lifestyle goals are. If you're looking for passive income, financial freedom, in the sense of freedom where you're not working day to day, then management's probably not the best thing for you. But I think at the same time, we like the control you get through it. We love being able to actually be fully responsible down to the very front end work with the residents on the property. So we have that going. We have the education company. It's the Jake and Gino brand has grown into an education company where there's been a ton of successful students that have been able to do all kinds of deals in the last 12 months. And then the loan brokerage, which is the newest arm of the business. Actually, we completed 2 deals last week with that, but that's basically helping people find the best, the best. A lot of the debt's agency debt going to Fannie and Freddie, but everyone thinks that Fannie and Freddie are all going to be the same no matter who you go through, but there's actually different ways that people underwrite it, so it's a lot of actually helping guide people to find who's going to help them get the best terms and the strongest result for Fannie and Freddie.
So this has all happened in 6 years. Let me give you the genesis of how this started. We call this multifaceted multifamily. I mean, Al does it on the same scale, right? We have an investment property, 25-unit property. We buy another property. We're scaling up. We have 60 units. All of a sudden, we start a podcast and education. One great way to monetize. One great way to get in front of a lot of people. One great way to start raising money. From that, the property management. Jake wanted to get out of his job. He's a drug addict. He hated it. So what did he do? He property managed. So 10% of $16,000 a month is $1,600 a month of the property management fee. When you start making $100 grand a month, he's making 10 grand in property management fee. So for him, that got him out. He got him out a lot sooner. And then he had cost segregation on top of that. He got out even quicker. The next one was the education. After that, we did the syndication company. I brought Dylan on a year ago to start Brand Partners. We had 600 investors on our database. I couldn't call 600 investors. There's just no way for me to possibly do that. You need to create a substantive relationship with all your investors. I brought him on. He did a kick-ass job. He really did. On our first deal, we know what we're doing. The big thing is commit, then figure it out. That's the story of my life. I commit to something, and then you just figure it out. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You need to work hard. You guys all know real estate is hard work. 3 things for financial freedom. I say work hard, work smart, and then if you're lucky, you work with passion. That's what I ended up doing. So always think about working hard and then working really smart. That's why I brought him on. There's no way to convince all these types of businesses by myself. I do education day to day. Jake does property management day to day. Dylan deals with the investors day to day. But you don't have to start. You need to start somewhere and then start growing. And that's what we ended up doing. On that first deal, we were able to raise $2.5 million in 48 hours. And that's the picture. We were at Jake's house in October. I remember that's the day that you were on the boat. We were out on the boat. I was having a great time. And he's fearful. He's like, we got to get on this investor call. So he actually got off the boat. We're tubing and everything. I'm like, dude, you need a little bit more, right? But that's how serious he is. I mean, he's 25 years old. He's an amazing millennial. Millennials get a bad rap, but he's an amazing guy. No, I'm serious, really. I mean, and I always say to people, 5 years ago, I would not have been able to hire somebody like that because as you grow in life, you'll be able to attract more of what you want, but you have to get out there. So from that syndication company, we bought our second deal in February, started scaling up, and then all of a sudden, Jake, which is great, we need partners because they push you. We're writing a second book. Did I want to write a second book this year? No, but he pushed me to write a second book. Did I want to start a loan brokerage? No, but it's amazing because it's a component of our business with education. When we sign up a student, they have education questions on the brokerage. Well, Nick is taking care of it. So as you can see, it's an amazing business where you just start small and you start growing and layering up and start creating these multiple streams of income. I started with 3 streams of income back in 2013. I had my restaurant business, I had a little private note, and I had a fourplex. And today I've got over 23 streams of revenue from all these different avenues. Do I have to be active in all of them? No, but I'm active in some and I'm passive in others. And that's the great thing about syndication. Syndication can make you passive and help you create and grow your wealth.
And then, yep, so millennial, 25 years old, eat a lot of avocados, spend a lot of time on Instagram, right? Former sales manager, started off actually in the real estate sales, education and investment company as a sales manager for them. Started investing in single family about 4 years back and realized quickly that there's a lot of challenges that come along with investing in single family rentals. I'm sure many of them are familiar with some of the challenges that do come along with that. So I got to the point where I actually sold all the single family that I owned, and it's all in multifamily at this point, but play on day-to-day investor relations, acquisitions, and you know, avid reader. Always like to have some kind of book at hand. Education times action equals results. This is something that is one of our, it's a company mantras at this point, right? It's something that we really believe in. It all starts with getting educated. You have to take, you almost at first your action in multifamily should be education, right? You shouldn't just go recklessly investing your money into apartment buildings. You should be making sure you're really diving in and learning, the nuts and the bolts of the business beforehand. Whether you're an active or a passive investor, it's super important that you're getting educated along the way. So even if you're a passive investor, you want to make sure you're able to vet the deal, vet the sponsor, and know what you're doing before you make any kind of investment. And obviously, the action is a given.
So, Dylan, let me touch on my one turning point in my life. 44 years old, just gone through the Great Recession. I needed to work in personal development. So what did I do? I went full bore. I went to become a certified life coach. I didn't want the certification, but I needed to work myself. And I needed to answer the big question, why? What is my why? Whenever you get into an investment, there's 2 things you need to do. Why are you getting into an investment, and what's the exit strategy? We like buying multifamily. Our exit strategy for multifamily is we like buying whole. Why did we do syndication in the beginning? 2 reasons. I was afraid of investors. That's my fear. Public speaking a little bit, but investors and taking their money. I was afraid of that. What happens if I lose their money? I was afraid of that. And the second thing is we're really buying whole. Where syndication, sometimes you have a shorter time frame. It might be 5, 6, 7 years. But Jake and I, we're going to hold our assets in perpetuity. So those are the 2 things you need to think of when you're getting into any investment. Why are you doing it? And my thing was, why am I getting into multifamily? Why am I in the restaurant business? I figured my why was, I've got a family, I want to be a role model for them, and I want to be financially free. Figure that out, so that multifamily is the way. The next step was, how do I do it? So it's important for you to do that. And for me, life coaching is amazing. So if you're all interested in working yourself and going to personal development, take a look at it. I went to IPAC. They're in Jersey here at the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching. Great thing, you work on yourself, because you need to work on yourself. You need to know why you're doing something, because there's going to be a lot of tough roads there. You know, when you start buying these assets and they're not cash flowing, you need to stick in there. And if you don't have a strong enough why, you're going to deviate off that road. I've hit a lot of bumps in the road. Our first deal, 25 units, second deal to go out 6 months after we buy it. It's 10 grand. You know what I mean? If I had not been all bought in, 6 months after that, I remember the tenant died in one of the units. I'd never experienced that before. That's a tough one. Getting sued by tenants who have dead folks and it's their furniture? Really? So there's a lot of stuff that it's difficult, but as you go through this stuff and as you commit, you'll figure it out. But if my why wasn't strong enough and I didn't hate my restaurant job that much, I might not be here today. So figure out what your why is. Yeah, anger is a great motivator, but you know what? If you keep anger too long, it will burn you out. I mean, I used that for long enough, and then when I became financially free, I figured out I'm moving down there. I want to work for something greater. So that's what multifamily's done for me. I think it's the same thing for all of you.
So I want to touch on this briefly. Just what is, financial freedom to us is really when you have your passive income exceeding your monthly expenses. And I think a lot of people have heard that formula before, but it's also important to think about not only your monthly expenses, but also your reinvestment plan, right? How much above your monthly expenses do you want to get to where you have a reinvestment plan to build some true security, as we heard from the last speaker. So it's always just, first coming up with that number for you, and then it's thinking about, you have two forms of income. You have your active income and your passive income. Keller Williams is able to provide an awesome, avenue to go out there and create, as much active income as possible, right? There's no ceilings on your potential within the Keller Williams organization, so you can go out there and create some, great income for yourself. And then it's thinking, what's my plan after we create that active income? How am I going to take this and start converting this into passive income long term, so that I can start to get my money to really go to work for me. So again, active income is your business, your commission, your job, your transactions. It's what you're getting paid for when you're physically working, and your passive income is when your money is going to work for you. And that's all different types of real estate, single family, multifamily, retail, office, industrial. I know we want to touch on syndication, and we definitely want to go into that. We have a pretty detailed presentation prepped here, but we want to definitely make sure we have plenty of time for Q&A on this. It sounds like a lot of people in the room have already invested in multifamily, so.
Are there any questions right now? You guys want to ask any questions right now before we jump into it? I love questions, so ask anything, please.
My question is, how do you set up the legal structure to protect yourself from the loss of the possibility investment?
Within a syndication? Okay, great question.
Well, on our first deal, I'll talk first. I'll let him do the syndication. I created an LLC for each property that I own, depending on the size of the amount. So I've got 14 or 15 LLCs. Is it a pain in the ass? It's a pain in the ass. But I want the liability protection. Plus, it's also good bookkeeping for me. So when I go and refi a property, that property by itself, I'm not commingling funds. So I know they have something called a series LLC. You can look at that. Never touched that. We haven't done that yet. So a guy by the name of Scott Smith, Royal Legal Solutions, is basically a big entity here. It's a master, and all below you can have it. It's a more inexpensive way of doing it. We haven't done that, and I don't think we're going to do that. But a lot of people are they're talking about that. There's been no contract law. There's been no law in the last 20 years going against it. So he says it's safe. I'm not sure, but I perform LLCs for every single entity, even for a capital company, even for our Jake Gino, even for our syndication. We have LLCs everywhere. It's expensive, but it's worth it.
Are you going to talk about 1031 too?
I'm sorry?
Sure, 1031.
We can if you want to. I mean, we're working with Dylan will touch on it as far as getting
Sure.
everyone into syndication.
Yeah.
Quick question on the LLC real quick. What about irrevocable trusts versus the LLCs? Because,
Okay.
so the LLCs, from my understanding, is that if you were to get sued, it tracks back to you. So to have full protection, you should have trust,
You
like
can put it in a
irrevocable
land trust. Yeah, you can put it in a land trust. We're thinking of doing that to shelter it, but that's why you try to prove it's separate LLC, so if one gets sued, that's only liable to that entity itself, so.
But that one single LLC could still be tied back to you, no?
I mean, I guess they could pierce the corporate veil, I guess they could, I mean, anything's possible. Good question.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think we're necessarily experts that we're going to use the trust involved, but
You could use a trust. A lot of people don't land trust too high. I mean, we haven't done that, so that's something that we haven't done. And she goes to 31.
And then just real quick, yeah, so I want to touch on the 2 points with the 1031. So the 1031s with multifamily, it applies just like single family. You can take the property, sell the property, and roll the funds into the next asset that's of like kind, and I think of like kind can really just be an income producing, commercial asset. So that definitely takes place. And with 1031 and syndication, you can, if everyone's invested in a syndication deal, and the sponsor says, hey, we have another property lined up and we want to exit this one at this time, how many of you guys want to 1031 into this next property with us? And if 51% of the investors opt in to actually 1031 into the next syndication, then you can do that. There is challenges with 1031ing from just, say, if you sold a single family rental and you wanted to 1031 that into a large syndication fund, there is a lot of challenges with that. There is ways to get complex and structure it into like a tenant in common that converts to a standard syndication, but typically that only makes sense, not necessarily with, say, a $100,000 single family house, but if you had a $500,000 or $1 million in equity within a commercial structure, and you want to sell that into a syndication, there's ways to get complex and do it, but that's with syndication 1031. And then was there?
Yeah, so your investors that invest in your syndication, are they investing with you through like an LLC, or are they doing it personally? Where do you see that?
Yeah, so some of them are. there's, I'd say that, you know, there's all different opinions on it, right? So I always say contact your attorney when I get asked this question. This is one of those questions you get 8 different answers on. But most of them just do cash, if possible. I'd say probably about 1/3 of the capital comes through, like we're gonna hear from Damien later today, the QRP, solo K funds, or self-directed IRA. We're seeing solo K and you know, the QRP being more and more common, and I'm sure you'll learn about that later on from Damien. But that's typically, as far as investing with an LLC, you know, instead of cash, I think you're gonna get all different answers on that. But go ahead.
Let me answer the 1031 question just real quick. 1031s need to qualify into an intermediary. That's one thing. Second thing is, this is one of the reasons why multifamily is so hot, because people have made so much money in the last 3 or 4 years. They're taking the 1031 money and bidding up assets to save on taxes, which they're not buying right. That's the problem going on right now. So they're buying at the top end right now because they're saving a couple $100 grand in taxes. So if you know there's a 1031 transaction going on, use it to your benefit, because there's basically time of the essence. You need to close within 6 months. You need to identify assets within 45 days. So with the 1031, just be aware. And if you're bidding with somebody who has 1031 money, just be careful, because they've got that money. They're actually, it's tax deferred. One day that tax is going to become due. You know, whether you're selling or whatever, it's going to become due. I've done 2 in my life. One 30 years ago, we screwed up. Lawyers screwed it up first. The second one, we got qualified into intermediary, so you need to have that. And on the LLC, when you're investing in a syndication, you're a limited partner. Your liability is only limited to the amount of money you put in the deal. Us as being the general partners, we're the ones who are signing on the debt. We're the ones that the deal goes south. We're the ones responsible for it. So we're not putting any money technically into it, let's say. On the LP side, we don't really have to. Sometimes they want 10% money in,
Yeah.
we'll roll that in. But that deal goes south, it's a non-recourse loan, but we're on the debt. So you know what, if we don't make that debt whole, we'll never get another deal again. We're basically out of business.
Yeah, as a sponsor, you have to put at least 10% in, but usually it's a minority of the total investment. And then I wanted to touch, because I know you asked on the legal documents too. With syndications, you're technically creating a security. So let's just go into it in case there's anyone here that's lost on what is a syndication right now. So syndication is, again, basically a way of being able to offer an opportunity for a group of investors to buy a large asset that they may not be capable of purchasing on their own, or it may allow them to get into more assets, to be more diversified when you're buying large apartment complexes. So what we do is we actually have a syndication attorney create a couple documents, but it's really usually your PPM, private placement memorandum, which outlines all the risks to the investors and kind of spells out the projections and things like that, and the liabilities and the control that the investors have. Then they have the operating agreement. So with that, you'll find that we're creating a security, right? So this is all registered through the SEC, and as an investor, security means it's probably the most passive form of real estate investing there is, right? Because if you go out and buy a single-family property, you still have a job, and your job is to manage the manager, right? When you're investing in a syndication, you are trusting that the sponsor is in position to manage the manager, or in our case, to lead the management company that manages the assets, right? So it is the most passive form, and because it is a security, it is really a completely passive investment. That's why it's so important that you really trust the sponsor to take control over the asset and make sure.
Let me jump into it. Just Google the word the Howey test to see if you're in a syndication. It's basically an expectation of a return with doing nothing. So if I give Dylan $50 and he's going to give me a return and I'm passive, that's a syndication. Whether you're in a $20 million deal or you're a $100,000 house. So a lot of people are actually creating syndications. I'm sorry? Oh, the Howey, H-O-W-E-Y. It's the Howey law. Back in the 1930s, there was a case law back in the 30s. What happened was he was an orange grower. He was collecting money from investors. When the deal went south, he said it was a syndication because he was getting money from them, and they were passive. They weren't doing anything. They were just expecting a return. So that is technically a syndication. So a lot of people are creating these syndications and not even knowing that they're doing it. So if you're creating a partnership with somebody and they're totally passive, make sure your partner is doing something or is active in the business, or else you are creating a syndication. The other thing is we see a lot of students who partner up. If you have 6 or 7 or 8 partners in a deal, the SEC might look at that and say that looks like a syndication. So just be careful. Call a syndication attorney. We deal with Kim Taylor. She's awesome. I mean, I can connect you with her. We get no benefit from her. I just love her. She does a great job. She's very reasonable. It costs about $15,000 to create all the documents, private placement memorandum, the syndication, the operating agreement, subscription agreement. And who pays for that? Your investors pay for that. So it's worth it, and she'll walk you through the whole
as a passive investor in syndication, are your tax benefits limited?
You can touch on it. Yeah.
As a passive investor in syndication, are your tax benefits limited? This question. So, yeah, the answer is the tax benefits are going to be passed through on your pro rata share more often than not of ownership. But at the same time, usually the general partner receives some of the bonus depreciation as well. And there's and everyone's going to be different in the way that they structure it. But typically, you do receive less. But in terms of are they limited, as in do not receive depreciation, things like that, that's definitely not the case, right? You know, typically you'll see a large, with bonus depreciation laws where they currently are, usually we'll see a large amount of depreciation. In fact, a lot of our investors are high-income earners that they specifically invest for the depreciation. So you still do receive a significant amount, and then you still do receive the ongoing depreciation after the bonus depreciation. But you know, they are somewhat limited in comparison.
So the general partners are getting a little bit of a grip, a little bit of appreciation, and they're not putting any money in the deal. So you wonder who wrote that tax code. You wonder how that happened, right? I mean, you know, we don't write the laws, but we just have to use the laws the way they're written. So, you know, that blew my mind when I heard that. I only figured that out 6 months ago. So I'm like, wow, I'm getting appreciation from GP. It's a great deal. I like that.
So how do we invest in the market? How do we start?
How do you start?
Yeah.
Well, there's a number of ways to do it, right? And that's what you really have to ask yourself, right? Because you know, you can invest actively, and you can go out and learn the process of underwriting deals, building. It's all broker relationships. There's very little, you know. I know it's in single family. You can find a lot of off-market deals and kind of do a lot of direct mail and yellow letters and cold calling and things like that. Whereas multifamily, there's enough brokers out there that have enough incentive to just be calling these owners and doing broker opinion and values constantly. So you really find the deals through the brokers. So it comes through first getting educated, second building relationships with brokers, and then getting out there.
So let me take this a little bit more. So the first thing, like I said, is what is your why? Do you want to do this passively or do you want to do it actively? So if you want to do it passively, what you start doing is going on sites like Bigger Pockets, going to arenas, going to meetups, and see who's putting these deals together. Then the second thing is you have to vet the sponsors. Are they honest? Are they worthy? Are they transparent? We do monthly webinars. So whether we're having a great month or a bad month, we're having one Friday night at 5 o'clock. We're webinar Friday at 5 o'clock. But once a month, we're doing it, and we're transparent, and we're showing our investors. So you have to choose the sponsor. Then the next thing is, you know, where are you getting your money from? Where's the investment? Are you getting it from your IRA? Are you getting it from savings? How much of it do you want to allocate? The next thing is, what markets do you want to be in? You have to learn all that education. So we teach about selecting a market. Now, are you going to be selecting in your backyard, or are you going to be selecting out of your backyard? The next thing, are you going to be doing it actively or passively? I mean, I got lucky because Jake moved to Knoxville, Tennessee, and I just followed him. I was investing in Rochester passively. I I had a management company, third-party management, when I first started 10 years ago, and I did that because I wanted to get a cash flow number. I wasn't thinking about capital appreciation. I was buying a $60,000 duplex, making $12 a month rent, thinking that is great. But when one of those tenants goes vacant, I got to spend $3 grand to fix that unit, and you know it's empty for 2 months. My cash was gone for 3 years, and I couldn't scale up. That was the big thing. So doing it in a market, selecting that market where there's no job growth, it's all Section 8. It was horrible, but I thought cash flow is king. So then what happened? Jake went down to Knoxville, and I love that market. I fell in love with that market. People are moving down there. The affordability is great. Job growth is good. Population growth is good. You can still buy assets that are relatively decent cap rate. So I chose that market. So I think the first thing is, if you're going to do it on your own, let's say you want to start it yourself, select the market. The second thing is start networking, like you said, with brokers. Start networking, start building your team out. And you already know how to build rapport with brokers. So let's start doing that, and the deals are going to start flowing. The third thing is start partnering with people in that market. And once you start doing that, you start getting deals. If you have it on the passive side, you can also start by raising money for other people's deals. So if you know a big syndicator is doing a deal in a market, and you've got a lot of capital, you have to learn how to actually underwrite the deal. You have to learn all the steps to do it, but you can piggyback, or what they call sub-syndication. You can start raising for money at the point of the deal and get a little piece of the general partnership and start that way. Or you can put $50,000 of your own money into a Jake Gino deal or someone else's deal and learn that way. You learn baby steps. If you got money in IRA, that's the best way to learn. Let's get the game that way.
So there's no easy answer. It's really, you know, there's a million ways to get started.
I just had a question on the 1031 again. I know you said that you had to pay the taxes eventually, but if you really pay the taxes if you sell, if you die and pass it all along to your kids, I mean,
It's step up in basis, yes, exactly, yeah. I mean, I'm just saying, in general, it's gonna come due sooner or later. So I mean, even if you get a stuff in basis and you roll it out, yeah, I'm like I said, I'm not a tax guy, but everyone thinks it's tax deferred or it's tax free. Don't think of that. It's like when you refi a property. We refi $9 million, everyone thinks it's tax free. Technically, it's not, it's a loan against yourself. I'm not paying taxes today, so I've got all the money in. It's amazing. But when I do pay that property, it's not going to capture that. Yes?
My question is, what is for the investments of the syndication?
Thank you. My question is for the investors for the of the syndication. What if the investment fails? Is this under FDIC?
No, so the investment sales is actually through us as a sponsor. So as a sponsor, you are able to actually raise capital, right, for your own transactions. Now, if someone that was not licensed was raising capital for us and giving commissions, that's illegal, right? But actually, as a sponsor, when you create the security through the exemption that we do, the 506B, 506C exemptions, which are really the common ones, then you're actually able to raise the capital through yourself. So really for us, it's regulated by the SEC, but it's an SEC exemption, and as a sponsor, you're able to actually do that yourself.
So you mean that if the money didn't come back, there's no protection for the investors? Is that what you mean?
Okay. So you're talking more so in terms of are the investors protected by the FDIC?
Yes.
So the answer is no. To my knowledge, no, they're not. Right? It's basically the investors. All the risk is spelled out, and the risk that the investors take is that you do lose your money, right? If the asset went to zero, then the investors walk away with zero, right? But they're not liable for the loan, right? The only thing that's actually at risk is their actual initial investment capital. And that's why it's important to get educated, right? To really know what you're looking at and what the investment looks like. The big things, we do a lot to really protect the downside and look at kind of recession-resistant assets, make sure we have a high debt coverage ratio, high break-even occupancy. But as an investor, you also want to do your own homework.
Let me touch on that. There's two types. Your 506B would have non-accredited and accredited. You can't go out and shut rooftops. You need to have a substantive relationship before you have the deal to approach it. So if I were to do a deal with you, and you're sophisticated, which is certain parameters. I think accreditation is the accredited investor needs to have $200,000 in a year for $300 if you're joint, or you need to have $1 million in net worth exclusive of your house. That makes you an accredited investor. If you're a sophisticated investor, I need to have some sort of relationship with you before I can present the deal to you. Now, if I'm doing the 506C, I can shout at the rooftops, I can announce my podcast, but I can only take that accredited investor status. And you need to have all those documents filled out, and you need to know that they're accredited, you can prove that they're accredited for you to bring them into the deal. We did a 506B on our first and second deal because it was more we had friends and family. We had a big network of people, and that's where a lot of people are going to start out with on your first or second deal, raising money from friends and family.
So I have a question on syndication. I've had a couple of opportunities where I could have invested, but I didn't because I felt like I wasn't equipped or knowledgeable enough. So this might be a loaded question, but how does one get kind of the bearings to be able to get into something like that? Like, does it have to be with someone you completely know and trust? Like, these are people I don't know, but they're part of my network, and I have opportunities that I'm not taking advantage of.
Still, let me answer the question. Mike, how did you get into it? This is student Jake Gino. How did you get into syndication? How did you learn about the process?
Well, basically, this is you guys. I went to a couple of meetups that Jake Gino were at, followed them for some time, and after listening to them, I just got very comfortable with the way they do their things and kind of run their businesses. And the community that they have, I've gotten to know and trust, and would pretty much invest with any one of their students. It's just a different type of person, and being from New York, born and raised, we're very quick to distrust people. But
That's such a nice way of putting it.
I kind of learned a lot. I get in both their deals that they syndicated, and thus far I'm very, very happy with it.
So I think the most important thing is, in life, to be successful, you have to have a successful community. You have to surround yourself with like-minded people. If you don't have that community, that environment, that's where I created Jake Gino. I've tried to do that. We learn. We're like-minded. If you make a mistake, we're learning the education. You need that environment. That's the important thing. I think you can choose anyone, any environment out there. You need to learn about the sponsor. That's the most important thing. When that deal goes south, and I talked to a couple of students last night, their deal's going south, the syndicate or the sponsor are hiding. You don't want that kind of sponsor. So really go out. Like I said, Bigger Pockets is a great place. Start learning there and start finding out who's doing these deals and start learning from them, because you need to educate yourself. And it's not going to happen overnight. Spend 6 months, invest in your education. It's not a cost, it's an investment, because you will always have it. Once you learn how to underwrite the deal, once you learn the cap rate, once you learn how to select the market, you will always have that. And then that's how you underwrite the sponsor. And you'll be able to ask them a lot of questions. You'll be able to keep going on the phone for an hour and annoy the crap out of him. But at the same time, you're doing due diligence. It's just like anything else. Two most important words in real estate and in business and investing is due diligence. Why are you investing in Knoxville in 150-unit property? And why are you underwriting to rents at 6% for the next 3 years when they're really not going to go up 6%? All these questions you really have to learn. And I think syndication is a great way to start, because you're limiting your investment, you're putting a little bit of money in, and you can learn from people who are doing it. That's the most important thing. And success leaves clues. Just find people who are successful, start following them, start mirroring their success.
Yeah.
Hello? Sorry, quick question. I don't know, maybe the slides are coming, but do you have an overview of what's really to be invested with you? Just what is your investment portfolio? What has been your return historically?
Yeah.
Put $100 in, what kind?
Yeah,
I don't know whether you're allowed to do that, but it's
Yeah.
we
We have a whole like 30,
as well.
we have a whole 30-page, we call it the Rand Roadmap, which pretty much walks through how it all works, what it looks like for us. And then usually a lot of this is done over the phone. I usually do a lot of phone calls every day, really, with different investors, kind of walk them through and answer a lot of questions. So we'll give you the contact info if you wanted to see that. We can definitely have, if you want to send us an email.
It lost in the weeds with that, so I don't think you're up your PowerPoints, you just go blind, but we have that on our website. And I've only started syndicating since November. So like I said, the first 1,000 units, I did it by myself. So these 2 deals we've done in November and February, so we just started, and it's really powerful. It's just another tool in your box. You don't want to deal on your own. Start investing fast. It's a great way.
I just want to go back to the previous question today, what you touched on there. I just pulled the slide up because relationship-based investing is something that I really drill in, because I truly believe that. Right now we're in a really unique time period, right? Ever since 2012, the laws have allowed for a lot more marketing of these type of investments, and you see things like CrowdStreet popping up left and right. And I think that it's all kind of an experiment right now, right? Because there's a lot of sponsors coming up and investors that don't know the sponsors. This business and private real estate investments all started off, and it's built on relationships, right? And I think the success of sponsors over the long run, the highs and the lows of the market, is going to fall back to relationships and who you're dealing with, who you're working with. So there's a lot of different levers, you know, the sponsors can pull when times do get tough, right? There's a lot of different, they can either choose to walk away from the asset and just move on to the next thing, right? Or they can actually pay attention to it and figure out how do we work through the challenges that we're facing, how do we share and communicate with the investors along the way, and how do we make sure that they still get paid as much as possible through the process, right? So I think it really does fall back on, I always put the sponsor first as you're vetting it. I look at it like a funnel, where at the top you have the sponsor, then it's the market, make sure you feel comfortable with the market, the location, then it's the sub-market, then it's actually the deal itself, right? Because you can go on CrowdStreet and or any of these other websites nowadays and see, oh wow, 30% IRR, that looks amazing, let's do that one, right? And just shop based on what looks like the highest projected return. Remember, these are pro formas, right? This is just how they're modeling it, and you don't know. You really want to make sure that are they actually being conservative on their numbers, or is this a high risk investment? Usually, the ones that are north of 15 or 20%, I think anything north of 15% right now for investors as an annualized return, I think is going to be potentially higher risk, right? Look at the debt. They're using bridge debt, right? Is there variable interest rate, right? What are all the risks that are playing into it? That's why with new construction, you usually need to justify over 30% IRR, because there's so many more things that can go wrong on that deal, and there's a higher chance of losing money. So that actually it's a risk and reward thing at the end of the day. I think you always want to make sure you're measuring that and also vetting the people first.
Let me share a quick story. I think people underestimate how much people like to work with people they like and trust. We had an event in October. And about 3 months ago, we were raising money for a deal, and we had this southern guy from Nashville. He's y'all doing, and so he's talking to me, and we're pitching him, and it's only $100,000 that he invested with us. And finally, the reason why he invested with us is he saw my family at our October Live event. He goes, I know you guys are a great family. I know I can just feel how good you guys are. So that's what it is. If you guys can connect and be genuine and be likable and do business with people you like and trust, it's going to come through to you. So I was blown away. I think Dylan was taken back by that because I mean, there was a couple phone calls, another late Friday call, that's what we got to do. But it was really eye-opening to me. So if you can just work with people, be transparent, be honest, be likable, be genuine, people are going to give you money. It's an opportunity. They're not giving you money. I shouldn't say that. You're offering them an opportunity. That's how we present it. We're giving an opportunity.
Okay, so kind of like a two-part question. The first part is, if you're going to invest, what is the minimum percentage that's worth investing? And then the second part is, if you're looking for investors, how many investors are you looking for?
That's a great question. So the first thing in real estate is you're always
Just
sourcing.
repeat the question.
Yeah,
Yes.
oh, yeah, go ahead.
If you're going to invest, what is the minimum percentage that you're looking to invest in? And then I think it was, the next question was, how many investors are you looking for on a deal?
Yeah, so first thing is when everyone leaves, the action step, create a power base. You're always going to be sourcing money and sourcing deals in real estate. That's the two jobs that you need to do, marketing and sourcing money. So who's your power base? Who are your friends? Who are your family? You have to tell people what you're doing, or else they're never going to know. And then once you tell them what you're doing and you're offering opportunities, you're getting to multifamily, some will think you're crazy. You know, my mom, one. Some will really think, hey, that sounds pretty cool, but you need to learn how to speak the lingo. So it's important that you actually prepare yourself, start that power base. You're always trying to create those substantive relationships. As far as minimums on deal, we try to keep a minimum of $50,000 because believe it or not, the people who invest less are the real nightmares. They're the ones who are calling you up. They're worried, and they're the ones who really are in. People who write the bigger checks. They're the guys who don't need the monthly webinars. They want to get their quarterly distributions. They want to make sure that you're getting paid on time. And that was a hard thing for us to really grapple. And that's what everyone goes through. And all of our students say, I wish I had not taken $10,000 for the deal from 50 investors. Because the more people you have in a deal, the more investors you have to nurture, and it becomes very difficult. I think the maximum is 35 sophisticated investors in a 506B. So you can't have more than 35 sophisticated in that. So you have to be careful. So try to get at least a $50,000 minimum investing in a deal. And like you'll never have enough investors. You're always trying to source them. And the funny thing is, when they invest in your first deal, they're going to put their toe in the water. They might give you $50,000, but on the next deal, they're going to come in for more. And on the next deal after that, they're going to tell their uncle, and they're going to come in for more. I mean, I've got my uncle who's Italian. I mean, he's got money, right? But he doesn't want to invest. But now he's asking me, just selling condos. So, you get money from unlikely places because they see you're doing something great. They see you're doing something, you're there. It's an asset. It's a real thing. It's not a stock. It's a building. You're providing a need, a housing. We didn't even look at the demographics about, renters, about this, average salary in the U.S. is $47,000. 48% of those people rent. That's who's renting right now. Millennials is 10,000 baby boomers a day in 65 years. That's what we're creating per day. Baby boomers, those people are renting. Millennials are not starting families. They're starting families later. That's who rents, people who are millennials young. So that whole is expanding. I think 35% of the population now is renting, as opposed to 31% 10 years ago. So all these things are fueling the rent growth that you're seeing. And basically, if you're a millennial and you want to work in Jersey today, and you want to come down to Knoxville tomorrow, why buy a house? There's no reason to buy a house. You buy a house for $400,000, you need to put 1 to 2% away for capex. So that's basically your principal paid on getting you now. So it's not an asset like our family thought. There's not that appreciation that they're going to have. You don't have that ability to use your house as an ATM. So I think a lot of that stuff is what's fueling multifamily. A lot of it. Plus you have money from China, Australia, Europe, where they have negative interest rates. We're getting dashed over here because our economy is growing at 2.5% to 3%. They have negative interest rates. So where's that money going? It's flowing. 10 years ago, it was going to gold and oil. Now it's going to multifamily. And demographics and all that, affordable housing, keep going with the numbers. There's 100,000 affordable housing users coming online per year. We need 200 to 250. So there's a lot, there's a lot of demand in that space. So that's why rents can continue to go up. And as rents go up and income goes up, your net operating income goes up, and that's why valuations continue to go up. In 2013, we bought our first property. Rents down there for one bedroom were $400 to $425. Our rents for a one bedroom now are $550 to $600 plus rubs. So it doesn't seem like a lot, but you're talking about a 50 to 60% increase in 5 years, right? That does a lot to your valuation, and it does a lot for the tenants. I mean, wages are growing at 3%. These people are not buying houses, and when the economy does crash, you can't get a mortgage, so you got to rent. So I mean, we're in a pretty good situation. That's why the valuations continue to go up. That's why we need to focus on buying right. Does that make sense, everybody?
I had a question. Actually, more of an answer. Somebody asked about how you learn this stuff. So you guys are great about not promoting yourselves. But I would say a great way to learn is they have a great community, Jake and Gino community. That's where I learned a lot about multifamily investing. And in fact, you can hire Gino to be a one-on-one coach, and I did that as well. That's really how I learned about multifamily investing, was getting one-on-one calls with Gino. You know, he told me, the general stuff I needed to know about investing, but more so I would say, here's a deal I'm thinking of doing, and he would walk through the deal and tell me why it did or didn't make sense. And, Gino's a pessimist, so everyone I had never made any sense, so I never did any deals yet, but hopefully we'll find one that he likes.
You gotta be conservative though, right? I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you're playing with other people's money, and I want to be conservative. I want this thing to scratch out. I'm not in it to make fees. A lot of people are in it to make fees, and they don't worry about their investors. And you need to worry about that. We're trying to build a syndication business, so we're a real deal hungry right now. And I will pass on. It's 80 deals. That's the average number of deals you need to look at to get one deal. So that doesn't mean you need to run out and drive to 80 properties, but you need to be analyzing 80 deals. And it takes a long time. So if you're doing 4 deals a week, guess what? It's going to take you 20 weeks to find a deal. It's all about numbers. And the quicker you learn to analyze, and the quicker you get deals sent to you, the quicker you're going to get a deal.
So everyone here, a lot of you ask me, when is there going to be a deal that BCP does that I can invest in? And I keep saying soon. It's Gino's fault. He says no to every deal I bring in. The other thing I think, and again, you guys don't want to advertise, but maybe there are some people, if they did want to invest with you, I don't think they're clear on, how would they get involved in one of your deals?
Yeah, so to register to invest, which I think, I'll go back to these two right here. But this is our site right there, randpartnersllc.com. If you register to invest, you basically sign up for an investor portal, right? And by doing that, what we then do is we'll add you to the investor list. We really are conscious not to spam the list, only if it's adding value. We will send occasional newsletters out.
It stops me. I try to send out stuff. It just stops me.
We have one a month, right? One newsletter a month, kind of limit on there, but we'll basically send out articles, YouTube videos, all kinds of stuff that we put out, and then when a deal comes up, typically we'll send out kind of an overview on the deal, followed up a week later, or a week or two later by about a 30-page, kind of your pro forma. We'll show the existing financials in place. We'll show the business plan, the strategy, the market, the sub-market, the jobs, the employers in the area, things like that. And then from there, we'll hold a webinar where we answer a lot of the investor questions and answers. So it's usually about a 30-day process where you have time to start to review all the materials before you have a chance to make the actual investment. And I think that even just from a learning perspective, I always encourage people to, if like you said, at first there's some uncertainty about when should I get into it. It's when you feel comfortable doing it, right? We just as much as you don't want to do it when you're uncomfortable, we don't want you to do it when you're uncomfortable, right? Because it's a two-way street, and this is an e-liquid. Usually your money's tied up for 5 years, 5 to 7 years oftentimes, right? So you need to be very comfortable with us, you need to be very comfortable with the type of investment. So even just to register, jump on a phone call with us, and then also just see the upcoming deals. Even if you did it for the next 2 years before actually taking the first step, you're going to learn a whole lot, because the webinars that we have, we're walking you through our business plan. You're going to, every single time you watch one of those or read through the pro formas or ask questions with our team, I think you're going to learn more and more about it. So I always encourage everyone, and it's an abundance mindset with us. There's a lot of sponsors out there. I encourage, if you want to really know this space and invest passively, register with multiple sponsors and see what everyone else is offering, and you get to know the space, you get to get familiar with that. And I think the more you do that, it's one of the best experiences.
So just Google multifamily syndicators. They'll all come up. Get onto the websites. I always tell people, when you want to get onto brokers' websites, Google multifamily brokers in your area and start opting into the list, and they're going to start sending offering memorandums. That's how you get deals. So what you do is email me at Gino@jakegino.com. If you want, I'll send you the first couple of webinars we did, so you can see how we prepared the presentation, so how you can start offering the opportunity, how you can get that mindset of being a syndicator, how you can start raising money. That first webinar goes through the presentation, and then the second webinar goes through the first month takeover, when we took the property over, and how you just give the highlights. And those webinars, they're great, because we talk about all the CapEx we do. We talk about floors, we talk about dog parks, gazebos, striping the parking lot, signage. We got rent from $60,000 this month to $68,000. We just signed a cable contract for $15,000. So all those things are outlined and displayed in our webinars.
Do you think it's would you say it's a red flag? I don't know as far as
Would you think it would be a red flag if you're a passive investor if the GP or fundraiser is not putting their own money into the deal?
I like that.
I'd say yes, yeah, we put at least 10% in every single deal.
Most banks will require that,
Right.
most institutions, but at the same time, I thought that way, that's why I didn't get into syndication, but they are putting a lot of skin in the game, they're putting a lot of time, and they're you know, the debt, their name is, the debt is in their name, so that's a real big risk for them. So, but for the most part, they're gonna have to put that, they're gonna have to put the 10% in, so, you know.
And you guys structure like straight equity split, pref, acquisition fees?
Yeah, we do a 70-30 split, and then we have a prep in place, and we have an acquisition and asset management fee.
So just be careful when you first start out, because you're setting investor expectations. So we did an 8% prep on our first deal, because we could hit that. The second deal, maybe I'm going to go 7, or maybe a 6, but investors are expecting that 8%, so it may be hard to shift. So depending on it, we do a 3% acquisition fee. Some people do 4. I mean, we had a friend who just closed a $50 million deal. He got a 4% acquisition fee. So what's that? $2 million.
Yeah.
But his investors, they paid that because you know why? He's giving them 18 to 20%. Don't worry about what you're paying. We all get caught up in that. Well, this guy's making this much, but how much am I going to make from the deal? And I get caught up in that too. And that's why I get into syndication. I'm like, I don't invest in this guy. He's not putting the money in the deal. But at the same time, if I'm making money, I'm not doing anything. That's if you're truly passive. And you can focus on other aspects of the business, of your life. That means a lot. That means a lot.
Do you think a big acquisition fee like that, like a $2 million acquisition fee, might cause the sponsor to overlook some things that they should have maybe not overlooked?
It's all who who you're dealing with. This guy hasn't done a deal in over a year and a half because he's that diligent with every single thing he looks at. I know he's looked at hundreds of deals and said no. And every deal that he's done with his investors has been an absolute home run, so he's got some serious loyalty from his guys. So it all depends on who you're dealing with. If it was a guy that is his first deal, or this guy's closing a deal every month in this environment, then maybe yes, right? But I think it's who you're dealing with, because you could do an 80-20 split with no fees and do some skinny deals left and right? So that's why I think it really depends, like, on kind of knowing who you're working with. It's all
So with acquisition fee, just look at the fee structure, because what we do is we do 3%. I would pay anywhere from 2 to 3%, and then some of them have a disposition fee. So when you sell out, they charge 1% on the back end. Some of them do a refinance fee on the back end. As far as asset management fees, we do it 1% based on the equity we raise. So if you raise $1 million and you have 1% asset management fee, you're going to get charged $10,000 per year to the asset managers. Any other fees, some of them do give a construction. So if you're a syndicator and you're doing a big, heavy value add, and you're spending $1 million in construction costs, they get 10% of that, so they get $100,000. Now, is that a lot? If it works in the numbers, it doesn't matter if it works or doesn't, as long as it works in the numbers, as long as your projections go out. The other thing I worry about with syndicators, when you start reading their pro formas, just be conservative with it. Like I said, a lot of them underestimate expenses at 1%, and then they overestimate the rent growth. And if you're off by 1 or 2 points in the rent growth, I mean, that's a huge deal. I'm trying to think if there's any other fees. So ours is 70-30, so 70-30, and then we sell, we'll split it 70-30 in the back end. Also, some do 50-50 in the back end. A lot of people, they all do different things. Just beware what you get.
And then you get your money, just so you know how the kind of cash flows through it, your capital stays the same the entire time, right? So this is just kind of almost like a dividend, like the cash flows, as the cash flow should be treated, right? So then at the sale, you're actually getting your money back plus 7% the upside. It's not like that dissolves into
return on principal. Talk about return on principal.
So yeah, it's a good tip for anyone that's researching and looking at deals. You always want to know, is the cash flow counting as a return of equity, or is it a return on equity? Right, because there's a huge difference there, right? Because if I said that I'm going to get you invest $100,000 and you're going to receive 10% cash flows per year, but it's really just a return of equity, that means that we hold the deal for 5 years and now you only have $50,000, right? So that cash flow is not really cash flow; it was more so a payback of your principal, and then now you have $50,000 plus X amount of the upside, right? So it changes things, right? So we treat it as a return on investment, right? So that's actually giving you more of a cash flow, and your funds stay in there the entire time period throughout the process. So it's a little nuanced, but it's definitely something that if you're looking at deals, it's one of those fine details that you want to pay attention to.
You're 6% prep and 70-30?
We do 8%.
8%.
I wish I was.
I'm curious to know, how do you find your properties, and also what happens after the 5 to 7 years?
Good question. So how we find them, it's all broker relationships. We have brokers, usually we know every broker in the markets that we look at, so we walk a lot of deals and A lot of them, I'd say about probably 50% will come off market, 50% on the market. And then when it comes to the, after the 5 to 7 years, we will sell the property more often than not, right? And then we could consider 1031 if the market conditions are right, but typically the plan is to exit the property. And that's when you receive a return of your initial investment plus X amount of the upside. So on this slide, 2 slides back, we actually had just kind of some visuals. I know it's hard to see for the audience, but more so just picture this. On the left side, you have your cash flows coming in, right? And your cash flows may be anywhere between 8 to 10% per year, right? In multifamily, that's pretty standard with where we are in the market right now. But then you also have your appreciation, right? 'Cause this is all income driven, right? So the more that we can increase the rents or the other income, or we can decrease the expenses, the NOI is what's determining the value on multifamily. So if we can find ways to do that, we're going to create a lot of equity. And that's really a huge part. You can't just focus on the cash flow. You have to also focus on how the cash flow, the more you can increase the cash flow, the more you're also increasing the overall value of the property, whether you refinance it or sell it. So typically about half of your return might come from the actual cash flow throughout the 5 to 7 years. And then half of it might come after you do your principal back plus the upside, because we always have the intentions on exiting for much more than we purchased for.
So I'll give you a perfect example for us. The first 1,000 units, we don't want to sell. We're actually in the process of selling one of them. It's a 16 unit. We bought it for $37,000 a door. It's worth $70,000 a door now. So we're going to sell 8 of those units. So return on equity right now, it's just so much equity, and we'll just get equity. I can take that money and repurpose it to different assets. So it depends on where the asset is, depends on the market sort of timing. On our first syndication, we have to sell. We can't refi. We can't get a supplemental loan. So for us, the asset was worth $6 million. I think in the next 18 months, we could probably worth $8.5 to $9 million. So there's $3 million of equity in there. So for us to realize that, we're going to have to sell it. So that's one example. On our second deal, we have 6 years of interest only at a 1.8 debt coverage ratio. The thing is maybe a cash flow beast. Real estate is only 2 things: it's debt and taxes. So one of my investors said, well, you're generating this because of the debt. I'm like, yeah, that's all real estate is. It's just debt and taxes at the end of the day. It's not toilets, it's debt and taxes. So this thing is 6 years of interest only. It's going to crush it for the next 6 years. So we're not going to sell this thing. Maybe year 7, year 8, or year 3, if it really escalated, we can sell it, or we can get a supplemental loan on it, refinance some of the proceeds, and return it to the investor. So like I said, every single deal is unique.
But are you guys typically focusing on more units or like rental properties that are like turnkey, or ones that just need like a little bit of work? So obviously like you can force appreciation, right, and get things at a lower price, and then just have more of an NOI that way, or like I guess what's your strategy typically?
Great question, and yeah, I'd love to share what our strategy is, because and then we can go back to our opinion on the how we feel about student housing and military housing. So when it comes to our strategy, we are buying stuff that is occupied, that is stabilized from an occupancy standpoint, which means you're going to have 90% occupancy, because then you can qualify for these non-recourse Fannie and Freddie loans, and you're able to cash flow out the gates. We typically want to hit at least a 6% cash flow threshold out the gates, even on deals. We wouldn't do it if it was a 6% throughout the whole time period, but 6% plus the value add, right? So our bread and butter is these 40,000 to 60,000 median income areas for the most part, right? Usually about 50, 60,000 median income, and we're able to go in, and oftentimes our residents that we're catering to are somewhere in that range where they're probably working in blue collar, retail, or we have a fair amount of healthcare, and we're able to go in, and instead of doing these heavy lifts, we're taking a 1970s building and turning it into an A class. We don't have, that's not what the residents are looking for, right? So we're able to do light improvements, oftentimes less than $5,000 per unit, put in some new floors, put in some new fixtures, paint the cabinets, put new countertops in, resurface them, and then you're able to just create a clean, quality place to live. Plus we have the self-management, which we really hone in on customer service. We hire people from some of the best steakhouses and different restaurants to basically come in and bring that customer service level to the residents on these properties. Oftentimes, and I think the combination of those has worked out really well. And I think you'd be surprised that people often think you have to go after something that's opportunistic and use a bridge loan and get the thing that's 60% occupied and put 12,000 unit in to get a great return. But I think you'd be surprised at some of the rent premiums and the other income streams you can create just through properly managing an asset and going and maximizing the inefficiencies. I think it's lower risk, and I think you can still have a pretty significant upside.
So Jake's, I'm going to take back on that. Jake's ideal, what we want to become is we want to become the Chick-fil-A of apartment investing. We want to have that customer service, right? Because when you go there, they greet you, they have the customer experience, and in the B and C space, those people often like it. I mean, they are not good customers. So we take over property, we have customer service. I wish we could share a couple of the Google reviews we had on this property we had at our first syndication. We're raising the rent, but we put in lighting, we put in signage, we took care of landscaping. So they're willing to spend another $200 a month on rent because they're getting the customer service. Most tenants don't move out because they're raising the rent. They know rent's going to be raised. These people knew that they're $200 on the rent. If you can deliver the customer service, they will stay. If their oven is broken, put yourself, if your hot water heater is broken and you need a week to fix it, are you staying there? You're out of there. So it's really important. Go on Google reviews, see what's going on with the property before you acquire it. This property had low rents, they had terrible customer service. That's important. And as far as buying value adds, we looked at properties that have income also, where the income is less, but all other things such as we do non-refundable moving fees, right? So we don't do security deposits. We get a non-refundable moving fee from day one. When the tenant's on, we get something called a surety bond. So if they leave, we get ourselves protected, and we can go after them for a judgment. So that $500 day one is a lower barrier entry to the tenant. Plus, I don't have that competition because a lot of people get the security deposit back. They already know that, so they get a lower barrier entry. I've got $500 day one. We have pet fees. We have application fees. We have late fees. We have pest control fees. We took a little property in Riverport. They charge $3 a unit for pest control. At 130 units, that's another $400 a month. Another $5 grand a year at a 7 cap. What is that? I don't know. It's like another $100,000 in value that I created for charging them pest control fees that everyone else is doing in the market. We do rubs, ratio utility billing. We go back, if they're not doing it, a lot of these mom and pops aren't doing it. So focus on the income. If you can generate income and raise it, that's one way. And the other way is the expenses. We just, Jake texted me last night on this 243 units. Garbage is down. We saved 18 grand a year in garbage, $1,500. Knock that out. $18,000 in savings is like $200,000 in NOI in cap rate. The cap rate's at 7%. So those are things you need to do. You look at the inefficiencies. That's why you need to know your market and focus on a market, because you need to know what the expenses are to run a property. We know in that market of Blueville, it's between $4,500 per unit to run a property. When we bought it, they were not building up water. Actually, tenants had their own water meters. So we bought it around $4,000. We think we can do a little bit better in expenses. For every dollar of expense that you cut, it's a dollar in your pocket. Dollar income, it's about 80% because you have associated fees with it. You can cut expenses on a property, also going to generate revenue. And the other thing is when you're doing these improvements, you're spending $10,000 a unit to improve a property, but you're only getting a $50 rent increase. Let's return on investment, $600 a year is going to take you a long time. We do $3,000 and we'll get between $75 and $100 a month. So it takes us to get 3 years to get our money back. So you do that in a heartbeat. And $3,000, $12 for flooring. I know you guys think it's crazy. 700 square foot apartment, $500 to pay. You got maybe $1,000 for appliances, resurface countertops, painted cabinets. You're into between $3,000 and $35 per year.
What about rent control? Do you stay away from rent control?
There's no rent control.
Yeah, we do stay away from that.
That's why we don't like the Northeast. The tenant laws are terrible up here. Day 5, late. Day 10, you're going to court. Day 15, you get a judgment out by the end of day 30. And that's part of your business plan, because in multifamily, you're selling time like an airline. If that seat is not taken on the airplane, that money's gone. If you don't have money for day 30, those 30 days, that money's never coming back. So that's an important part of your business model. That's why we like Tennessee. It's a great place. We love the tenant laws down there.
So stay away from rent control.
That's the thing. I don't honestly just stay away from it. You can buy it and buy it at a good number and then get rid of the rent control. And the rent control subsidizes and gets out, and you can put money to fix the unit and raise it to market. That's not a bad strategy. But I mean,
yeah, and it's very complex to underwrite. I have friends that do stuff in California with the rent control, and there's all kinds of different ways that you have to improve the property X amount to be able to increase the rents X amount. Hard to model, harder to evaluate.
Just be
you
careful.
can do it, but it has to be your niche. The same thing I would say about military to student housing. You can do it, but it has to be your niche, right? There's a reason we like to go in workforce housing, because we also know that if we're around a diverse mix of employers, if one employer goes away, or goes out of business, then we still have a solid job base supporting our residents, which is extremely important to us. if the school moves away or shuts down and you're in a student housing area, a lot of these things are so dependent on that one school. Or what happens is a lot of schools go out there and they actually decide to build their own student housing because they see it as another profit stream. And then what happens is everyone moves out of your properties into the school student housing because they're going to rent at the same price. It's going to be brand new, or it's closer. Military can be kind of the same way, right? If the base moves, then you're left in a tough spot. That's why military trades at a higher cap rate, because I think people are more hesitant oftentimes to invest in those markets. That being said, there's a ton of people that make great money investing in those markets as well as student housing, but it's a different management play. You have to know what your risks are. You have to do a lot of research and a lot of homework.
So that's why I say you need to know your market, because I don't know if you guys heard Long Beach, California, what they're doing, right? You raise rents, what is it? If you're raising rents by more than 10%, and the tenant has to move, you're paying for his moving fees. They just order that in. So $4,000. They're out, and you're doing your job. I had a student who bought one-bedroom units there. He had $850. He only bought a 6-unit. They were 500 or 600 square feet. They were $850 in Long Beach. He moved up from $1,450 a month for reposition the property. Imagine paying $300 for 600 square feet. I think it's crazy, but that's Long Beach. Now they just passed the ordinance. If he raises those rents by more than 10%, he's got to pay for the relocation fees. So you're into it for minimum floor rent. That'll kill your business model. That'll destroy your cash flow. That'll destroy your numbers. So know your market. Know when you buy a property, if they're reassessing the property taxes, underwrite for the new property tax assessment. Because I had a student last night that said taxes doubled on my deal, a 96-unit property. There goes your cash flow for the next 2 years. There goes your projections. So know your market, know your investment.
Do you have any idea of how many entities, like yourself, individuals or companies, are doing syndication?
I mean, it's a new buzzword.
Like how many competitors do you have?
I mean, thousands.
I have no competitors. I don't compete with anyone. I have a fun mindset. I don't need to do this anymore. So to me, they're not competitors. I mean, we do different things. So I love the portfolio. That's why I started by myself. I've got enough cash flow for my entities to live off of that. Wherever I do syndication, it's all gravy for me. So, and we don't compete. Everyone has something a little different. That's why you need to know the market. What is one guy? Let's say, for instance, Michael Blank. He's got a different preferred rate of return. Joe Fairless is another one. He's got a different preferred rate of return. He's in a different market. He's taking on a different risk. He's taking a different cap rate. Just because cap rates are higher, you think it's better. A higher cap rate sometimes denotes a little bit more risk. So it all depends. If you have a lower cap rate and you're adding value to the property, that's great. Because with lower cap rates, NOI goes up even more. So it's, who else can I call? Dave's going to speak today. He's another great syndicator. He's got a great business model. He's in Memphis. So if you just Google multifamily syndicators, they're all out there. Learn their model. And the best thing you can do, honestly, go on our website, jakegino.com. Go listen to our podcast. And I podcast. That's how I learned it. I podcasted probably top 20. Ivan Barrett's another one. Barrett Asset Management. Go listen to all of them. And you'll be like, wow, these guys, they all have a little different model, but it's basically the same thing. Pull a little bit from each one.
Hi everyone. I don't have a question, but I know Gino for a couple of years now, and I just want to say that, as Gino mentioned, there are tons of people that do syndications. You can find syndicators online, you can find multifamily educators online, but if you're looking for someone transparent, family man, who will tell you like it is, who's done it himself for many years with a partner, like I'm right here, what's that question? Gina is your guy, and if you want to know more, feel free to ask me. If you're looking for someone who will help you, even if you're not in his program, even if he doesn't know you, Gina is your guy. So
thank you.
But I was not paid. This is not paid.
Gina, how much you pay her?
It is now. Thank you.
My question is, what, obviously between 2013 and now, it's been a good time in multifamily, but what if the market goes down and you can't take your trend?
We haven't tried that because we're looking at 80 deals. I mean, that's the thing. It's an rewarding thing because we've got millions of dollars sitting there. So you have to be diligent because I know at the end of the day, if I can't get that prep, I'm going to have to push it out. And I won't sleep at night. I sleep great at night.
It's cumulative though. It is cumulative. So if you don't hit the prep, then you're owed it down the road, right? And it'll accrue
But it's
to a
hard to
sale.
go back to an investor and say, I need to prep this quarter. What I would do is I would take no asset management fees, I'd cut his property management fee, and I would do whatever I could. I put money into the deal to be able to return that money. That's what I would do.
What are some of the strategies you guys are using to reduce vacancy in your properties?
We've got 1,500 units. I think we've got probably 15 or 16 units empty. So we're running like 989. And that's a good thing and a bad thing, because that means that when you're running almost 100%, you should raise rents. So that's one thing. So to reduce it, it's all customer service. We're actually starting with Appfolio. We use Appfolio software. And we're starting out with their artificial intelligence. It's called Lisa. So we're starting that as trying to get leasing agents. But we need to staff our leasing agents. We need to have on every 20 units, you need a full-time leasing agent. You need to answer the phone. Because when they call you up and you're looking for an apartment, what do? You Google apartments in Canada. And they come up and you come up and they call you. It's a direct thing. You need to pick up that phone. And if they don't pick that phone up, the property manager has to call within an hour or else you lose that prospect. That's the whole thing. And then you have to have systems in place where you're competing with the market. You need to know what the market is. If you're just trying to rent a one bedroom for $600 and your competitor down the streets at $550, it's the same amenity, same property. It's going to take you time to rent it, so you have to really be in tune with the market's renting. And one thing that amazes me, that tenants, they don't know anything, right? But they do know what they're supposed to pay. They know that you're billing back utilities. It's amazing. They all know exactly. And the internet's great. It's transparent. All you do is go on apartments.com and Google it. And we don't spend that much on marketing. We'll go on Craigslist and Google a lot of Craigslist ads down there. We'll go on Thumper. We'll go on, Zillow does a lot of advertising. So it's all open. It's all open source. Not that much. We'll use apartments.com on some of our properties that need it for rent bump. But if we're having issues on one of our properties, like our Hammond property, it's 156 units. We have a little issue with renting it out. We drop the moving fee from $500 to $199. And that gets people in.
All right, we have time for one more question.
Hi, what's that? I don't know if you said this already. What kind of property management fees are you charging?
Yeah, great question. So the question is, what kind of property management fees are we charging? We charge 3.5% of gross collected income, which is the market's 4% plus other fees and stuff like that. So we charge definitely below market for the property management side, actually not our main revenue stream.
Depending on the size of the asset, unit. So if you're sub 100 units, they're going to charge between 5, 6, 7, 8%, depending on where ours. Once you get to the 100 unit plus, they should be in the 4 to 5% range. Anything 200 above should be 3.5%, depending on it. We're at 3.5% right now. Jake, you do a great job with expenses. And then, as an indicator, we charge an asset management fee. You can charge based on gross collected rents, 1.5%, or you can do a flat asset management fee of 1% on equity raise. So that's what it's easier to do it on the equity raise. So that's a straight line number. For the next 3 years, we're going to get that revenue going forward. If you want to be able to grow rents, you can just base it on collected rents.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Great job, guys. What do you guys think? Was that helpful?